Viewers, it's my pleasure to have Professor R. Vaidyanathan back with us again. We're going to look at the two ideologies that took birth approximately 100 years ago. And to know more about this and what happened to those ideologies, let's join Professor R. Vaidyanathan. But before we join Professor RV, I'd like to request you to please subscribe to our channel. We are in need of subscribers because we want to grow a little bit more, because if we grow more, then we can get more advertising revenue, and you are helping us in the process. It's not going to cost you a dime. All it is tell your friends, your relatives, and yourself, please subscribe to our channel. We would like to get to the 1 million mark as soon as possible. We are just about to touch 100,000, but 100,000 is not going to cut it. We need something more than that. We have been really trying to work on your help and support and coming to this point, but we need to get to the next level. Thank you very much. Professor RV, welcome to PGurus channel, and please take it away, sir.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be part of the PGurus initiative. And my pronouns to all the audience of the PGurus. Today we will look at something very interesting. Two major movements which started within the country, and of course the third one also, we will mention about it later. Around the 1920s, how they have performed and how one of them has not come up to the mark and rather on the decline, which is communism, while the other one, which is RSS, which is much more on the upswing in terms of its political wing at least. So we will have a look at that. The Marxism or communism had a very major setback after the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s. The Russia debacle was a very serious one for the communism all over the world actually. And after that, China has also, after Deng Xiaoping, changed its tact in order to become more market-oriented economy. The Marx didn't visualize a couple of things, even though he was very far-sighted for his time actually. Incidentally, he wrote the book called Das Kapital, not Das Labor. Very important to remember. He talked about the exploitation of the labor. In other words, what he mentioned was the labor surplus is what is captured fully by the capitalist. That is what is primary hypothesis. At those days, he didn't visualize the emergence of what you may loosely call the middle class or the role of the state. In many countries, the state began to tax the rich and then provide facilities for the poor. That's one thing. Of course, due to him, large amount of changes took place in terms of number of working hours and other things. These changes would have come about even without his, because of over time period, there was always a realization that there is a need. Man doesn't live by bread alone. He requires some amount of rest as well as perhaps better. So that is the type of thing one can argue. Second is, he also didn't visualize the emergence of this middle class we told. It's a very huge. So it has become a sort of a vested interest. So it was not a class conflict between the working class and the capitalists alone, but in between this middle class, which also participated in corporate forms of organization, joint stock companies, and much later into share market and other things, who began to have what you may loosely call a vested interest in the continuation of the system. Third is, he also didn't really think about the role of religion and various other associated activities of religion, even though he called religion as an opium of masses. And but it continued, and to that extent, both in Europe as well as in other parts of the world, they played a very major role, sometimes as a bulwark against communism. Last but not least is very interesting. The revolution didn't take place in Britain or France or any of those capitalist countries. It took place actually in Russia, which was basically a feudal and a peasant country ruled by the czars. And later in China, which was also a semi-feudal and ruled by the czars. So this is something very interesting. The dictatorship of proletariat was established in agriculture-based, primarily agriculture-based countries, and obviously it did not sustain for a very long period of time. It did sustain to the extent of something like say 60, 65 years. It was supposed to have been established in the government in Russia around 1917. Yeah.
Sir, with your permission, I want to read out the minutes of meetings held on 17th October 1920. The Communist Party of India, founded at Tashkent on 17th October 1920, consists of the following members: 1. M. N. Roy; 2. Evelyn Trent Roy; 3. A. N. Mukherjee; 4. Rosa Fittingau; 5. Muhammad Ali, also known as Ahmad Hassan; Muhammad Shafiq Siddiqui; Acharya, also known as M. Prativadi Bhayankar. It adopted a resolution establishing the condition of 3 months probation period as candidate member for those persons who wish to join the party. Comrade Shafiq is elected as secretary. The Indian Communist Party adopts principles proclaimed by the Third International and undertakes to work out a program suited to the conditions in India. Chairman M. Acharya, Secretary Roy, seal. Sir, I have one question. It says here Third International. So it looks like this was a communist convention for the international world, and these people all went from India and they decided that they are going to start the Communist Party of India. What are your thoughts, sir? Do you remember the background with which it came about?
See, 1920 it was established abroad, but actually there are some reports which suggest that in India, the Communist Party, around 1925. No, it is actually the Christmas, December 25th is the date which is given. But note, it is nothing very surprising because communist within India everywhere, it's a global movement. It's not considered as part of Indian movement or anything. They had this internationals, second international, third international. You read that also that they would go by the third international, right? Then there was Trotsky's fourth international, several. So they always considered themselves part of a global ideology and a global movement. But in India, somehow 1925 is also mentioned. Be that as it may, but the Indian communists primarily were between 20 and 25 there seems to have been large amount of repression and other associated issues. Then of course they were active in Kanpur, Aligarh and the Telangana region in south. Post independence, the communists in India, they waged a war against the government of India. Actually, from Telangana, it was the first war of major war for them. It was to liberate the using the peasants of Telangana. And it is suggested that time Stalin asked them, "What is your backup country? You are wanting to wage a war. That's all fine, but where is the country to which you can run away in case of there is a problem and other thing?" And anyhow, that did not succeed. The Indian army and police, it was considered as BT Ranadave line that time. BT Ranadave was one of the active persons for this type of an activity. And very sad actually that the first UPA government under Manmohan Singh, one of the first decisions they took under the pressure from the communists, that time if you recall, they were the ones which were supporting the government. They used to proudly proclaim the government is run from Alimuddin Street in Calcutta, which is their headquarters, CPM, and Gopalapuram in Chennai, which is the headquarters of DMK. I'm talking about the first the government between 2000. It was between 2005 and 2009. Yeah. So Manmohan Singh announced that these uh, rebels who fought against the Indian state as part of the freedom fighters, and then he announced compensation for them and pension and other thing. It's a very sad state of affair. I have written quite a number of letters that this is not acceptable. It should be withdrawn. Many people have forgotten about it, perhaps. Anyhow, so what I want to stress is that first attempt failed. And then the 64, the communists split into two groups. One is CPI and another is what is called CPM. In terms of, they claim that their assessment of the class structure of the India is different. That's why they split in terms of CPM recognizing it as semi-feudal and CPI recognizing it as the bourgeois, Indian bourgeois. Then, but the primary reason is the uh, identification of the Chinese war with China, as well as identification of China as a friend or a foe. Then in 67 again, CPIM split into Marxist-Leninist, Charamjivdar, and it's a very pathetic thing that they declared that Chinese chairman is our chairman. That's one of the, even though they are international, they never came out in this fashion. That was a very drastic type of a slogan. And later the Naxals split into something like 10 to 12 groups actually. Now some of them are united in some portion. Some of them are participating in election also. Even though the original Charo Majumdar line is against participating in any of these elections of this government. So communists have undergone several amount of splits and both on ideological basis as well as on various other. But primarily they were powerful in West Bengal, associated with that is Tripura and Kerala. If you ask me, if you analyze it very objectively, the West Bengal is more a nationalist type of a thing. It was a what I would call it equivalent of DMK in Tamil Nadu. It was Bengali nationalism. It was against Delhi. It was against various other aspects and other things. And that's how they built it up, and they were ruling for a very long period of time. But interestingly, they could not bring about any major social revolution. In the sense, they did a lot of land reforms and other things in terms of property, but not. For instance, there was a move by one of its ministers to remove all the Kali temples in police stations all over West Bengal. Every West Bengal cop, Thana, you will have one inside one Anumar or more so Kali. Not a huge temple, but a statue, and every day some flowers are offered to it, and he could not succeed. There was, even though the police union were completely with the CPIM, but he could not succeed in that, in removing any one, not even one Kali Mandir from a, because he told us a secular, we should not have Kali Mandir inside Tanas. Because Tanas are supposed to be representing the neutral state, but he couldn't succeed. So many other type of social evils and other things, including the caste problem, they could not deal with it squarely or anything. They had a huge amount of paraphernalia. They built up actually among teachers, among students, among various other groups, unions, but they were never active in what you may loosely call social activities, which we will now elaborate. Comparatively, RSS, which was established in 25 on Vijayadashmi Day, if you remember, September 27th, I think, by Balaram Dewar. That grew over a period of time into various subgroups. They created a huge, now if I remember, some 47 or 50 type of subgroups are there. Political grouping is called BJP, then Swadeshi Jagran Manch, ABVP for students, then Bharatiya Yuva Sangha for the youth. Then they have Anavasi Kalyan Kendra. Then they have the Seva Bharati during floods and droughts and earthquake and other type of times. Then they have also got this Ekal Vidyalayas. Any number of institutions have been created by them, and all of them are working in different parts of the country. And surprisingly, you could belong to any party. There is no need for you to be BJP, to be member of any of these organizations or anything. So what has happened over a long period of time, they have established themselves across the country in various of these organizations. Well, the communists never went into any of the what you may loosely call the social type of a organization. They were primarily for fighting the rights of labor and fighting for the rights and other things. This is the major difference you can see. Second is obviously RSS is one of the domestically grown, in the sense it's much more indigenous compared to the communists who are global. And so the developments in Russia or development in China significantly affect the communist movement inside India in order to formulate their policies and other things. This is another thing which we should keep in the back of the mind. The third is around 1920s, what was called the South Indian Liberal Federation, which later became the Justice Party. That was primarily by the Britishers in order to split the Indian movement in the southern part of the country. They created a so-called Dravidian identity, and it's all, much later it has been proved completely wrong in terms of the Aryan invasion theory and other things. But anyhow, that time it was very useful to them. And Iyer was one of their agents who was a Desha actually. He announced that, this August 15th, 1947 is a uh, mourning day. He begged the British, he wrote a letter to them also not to leave India, be here. And he also suggested, even if you leave India, it's okay. But as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, you rule from London. That was the level of his thing. He was clearly a British agent. And later on, a lot of reports suggest the Annadurai, one of his disciples who formed the DMK party, he was very much facilitated by CIA, the American group, the what you call the ambassador, or not ambassador, what is he called in the southern state? They have what a the consul general of US was extraordinarily close to DMK during 66, 67, 68 period. He actually learnt Tamil also. There was a report by T.N. Seshan, who wrote in his book about Annadurai being a CIA agent. He was called to Yale much later, and this Seshan was attacked in Tamil Nadu airport as well as in the hotel for suggesting that even. Anyhow, much later from Annadurai, the Karunanidhi took over the reins of this party. For interestingly, Karunanidhi is not one of the founder members of the DMK or anything. But he did a very good thing, if you can call it good at all, in a sarcastic way. He converted the whole party into his family enterprise, private enterprise of his family, unlisted private limited company, you can call it, wherein all his family members were benefited from the party. Later his son took over, and his grandson now is going to take over, and great grandson is waiting in his trousers to take it over. So in the process, what has happened, the whole ideology, or whatever you may loosely call, of the original EVR got comprehensively diluted. M.G. Ramachandran, one of the rebels to come out of the party after asking for accounts with Karunanidhi, he visited Mukambika temple and came back. There was a huge amount of crowd on either side of the road to welcome him, actually, even though he was a member of the DMK. So that was the last nail on the coffin of the so-called atheist party. Much before, in the 50s, when Shivaji Ganesan visited Tirupati, there were posters all around Tamil Nadu questioning him for visiting Tirupati, and Shivaji Ganesan has to sort of apologize, and later on he was removed from the DMK. Why I say is, so much water has flown down. Today, there is a reasonable amount of presence of RSS and associated organizations in Tamil Nadu, to the extent some people are suggesting they may even get some votes and maybe a couple of MLA positions even. Be that as it may. So the three movements, we can completely discount the liberal, South Indian Liberal Federation, which is a creation of the British government, something like a East India Company. They created it, and then they had their own. The other two, very contrasting and interesting thing to study, is the communist movement as well as that of the RSS. Communist movement, finally today you are aware, I am sure, is ruling only in, not even as a single party, but as a portion of a coalition. Actually, in Kerala, it was always different groups constituted together with the communist, including a Christian group, including the Muslim group and other things. And they formed the government. It's not a never single type of a thing. And when the Berlin Wall fell, they were shocked actually. They never expected it to happen because they thought that Russia is the ultimate thing which everybody will follow. And Mudribad gave a very interesting explanation that time. He told that regulation and control is extremely important in capitalist countries. Because of regulation and control, there is a lot of revolt and objections and other things. In communist countries, they should practice it. If they don't, then there is a possibility of fall. I was puzzled actually what he was talking, because Russia was one of the highly regulated and controlled country where everybody was spied upon by the KGB and by Stasi in the eastern part of Germany and other things. They never succeeded actually. Even today, there are reports suggesting that overall growth, wheat grown in Russia is significantly lower, maybe 1/4 or something of that of what is grown in Punjab. One reason given for that is about the so-called cold climate, but much more reason is the expropriation of the peasantry started by the Lenin, but more importantly by the Stalin period. So Russia never really, and today very unfortunately they are becoming some sort of a younger brother of China. They have to follow and China had much more, and China is no more. If anybody calls China as a communist country, I will, Chinese themselves will laugh at them. So because Chinese themselves do not recognize themselves to be a Chinese country, they have opened up Confucius centers all over the place. They are going back to the roots. They are more worried about the spread of the underground church, and so many other type of things are taking place in China. So the local growth of this RSS, and over a period of time, of course, they have also changed. Even though it was originally founded by Eddevar, more important is the Guruji, or what they are called, Golwalkar. He was the later who became the head of the RSS, and he is considered as the pioneer in terms of spreading it, in terms of ideology, in terms of. And one small tidbits, not many may be aware, he was not very comfortable with UCC, Uniform Civil Code, even though he was in charge of that. And he was also very accommodative, very interesting. Actually, Ashok Mitra, who was my teacher also, he was the finance minister of West Bengal. He was a very staunch communist actually. He once commented, I am a communist, not a gentleman. When somebody asked him, are you not a Badrlog in Bengali? That he told, Ami Badrlog na, Ami communist. Very simply abrupt. So he, in his title, one of his sort of biographies, he writes positively about Guruji Golwalkar. He says they shared the same committee as members of, he was a member of parliament, and Guruji was also, I think, accommodated into the committee, and they traveled in the country. And he says he is one of the finest gentlemen I have come across. And he was so, composed, and he was so much understanding and accommodative. So he is praising actually Golwalkar for his broad understanding of the Indian situation, which whom Ashok Mitra, who is a ardent, he was a finance minister of West Bengal, incidentally. He was also a professor in IIM Calcutta as well as at ISI. He was my teacher. He was a very, very sharp and very well-known. The point I want to stress is, over a period of time, the organization like RSS has also evolved in terms of its reach, in terms of its. I think one of the reasons for its success could be it's not single-minded focus only on politics. So many other activities which are also supporting or which are also helping the public at large in terms of seva, in terms of Ekal Vidyalaya, which huge number of schools, something like 30,000, 40,000 schools, one teacher schools were started. So it's and it has been able to do good amount of what you may loosely call social change also. Quite a number of areas it could bring down the caste differences, caste conflicts and other things, which are being exploited by the church in order to create more conversion among people, particularly between the listed community, SC and the others. While as on the other side, this organization is more facilitating in terms of cohesion among the social group. One has to wait and see what is the nature of the future growth of this organization in the context of political power being acquired at the center. At the states, of course, quite a number of states are not with the political wing of the RSS, but it doesn't matter. The whole idea is to create an atmosphere, which they have succeeded, I think. It's a very interesting contrast that these organizations, which started around 1920s, roughly 100 years old actually, and after that there are not very many new organizations which have come about with new ideologies or new changes. Maybe in the current digital world, you may get something new in order to organize people on various counts and other things. Otherwise, 100-year-old philosophy and ideology only we are again and again going into and then looking at it. That itself is a very interesting thing. After 1920, what happened? Why not so many other, all over the world, it is true, but more so within the country like India. I visualize maybe some new organization also based on some new philosophy for the internet era, what you may loosely call, I don't know, whatever name is you give it, right? Should evolve and then should come forward, and then, because basically it is a question of how to organize society, what type of way we should live our lives, what is the basis of our looking at within, looking at with other human beings as well as with nature. Basically, all through the ages there are three conflicts: man versus nature, man versus man, and man within himself. Man versus nature was answered by all these groupings: communism, Christianity, Islam, various other. Man versus man is still being, you had your crusades, your jihads, and various other wars, Second World War, First World War, all of them were man versus man. Man within himself, one of the civilization which focused on it is India, which always concerned about man's relationship with the, you may loosely call God, or with the Paramatma or something. So perhaps for the internet age, some new philosophy has to evolve, and that could lead to different type of conflict or differences in the society. But I think the evolution of communism and RSS could be a very good research topic for, not in a very biased fashion or anything, more in a bipartisan fashion. It could be a very serious research topic in India. This is my view. Thank you very much.
Contrast, because both more or less started at the same time. One is thriving and the other one is not, and to find out the causes for that would be very, very useful indeed. Thank you very much, Professor RV, and please subscribe to our channel. Namaskaram.